The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Running Wolf dragged his weakened body across the cracked earth. 3 days without food, his water skin empty since dawn. Death was circling, patient as always. Then, beyond the wavering heat, stone walls emerged, an ancient temple, forgotten by time itself, but guarding its entrance stood a beast, unlike any he'd encountered, a massive dog with battle-scarred fur and eyes that held something beyond animal intelligence. It growled, but made no move to attack. Instead, it stood firm, as if judging whether this dying Apache was worthy to pass. What sacred treasure could demand such a guardian? What would cause a hardened warrior to weep upon discovery? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crimson sunrise painted the desert in hues of fire, as Running Wolf pressed his hand against the wound on his side. 3 days had passed since the attack. 3 days of hunger gnawing at his belly, thirst scratching his throat raw. He clutched his medicine pouch, fingers tracing the worn leather and beadwork that contained all that remained of his former life. Inside that small pouch, a hawk feather from his first hunt, a stone smoothed by the same river where his son had taken his first steps, and a small carved wooden bear his wife had made when they first married. The pouch was more than possessions, it was memory made tangible. "The spirits have not abandoned me," he whispered, though his cracked lips made speaking painful. Not yet. His mind drifted back to the village, to the moment everything changed. The morning had begun like any other. Children playing, women preparing food, men discussing the upcoming hunt. Then came the thunder of hooves. Not the buffalo they had been tracking, but something far deadlier. The blue-coated soldiers appeared without warning, rifles gleaming in the morning light. Captain Harrove at their head, face set like stone as he gave the order that would destroy everything. "No quarter," the captain had said, words Running Wolf hadn't understood then, but whose meaning became brutally clear as the soldiers opened fire. Running Wolf had been at the perimeter, returning from scouting. He watched in horror as the first volley cut down 3 fingers, the elder who had taught him to track game when he was just a boy. Then Walking Bird, who told the best stories during winter nights. Then others, so many others. He had fought, of course, killed 2 soldiers before a bullet tore through his side. But there were too many. He'd fled only when White Hawk, his closest friend since childhood, pushed him toward the horses. "Live, White Hawk," had commanded. Someone must live to remember. Those were the last words Running Wolf heard before a soldier's bullet silenced White Hawk forever. Now, alone in the vastness, Running Wolf opened his medicine pouch and carefully removed each sacred item. The hawk feather, strength and vision. The river stone, endurance and patience. The wooden bear, protection and courage. His fingers lingered on a 4th item, one he rarely touched. A small bundle of sage and sweetgrass his grandfather had given him before passing to the spirit world. "When all seems lost," the old man had told him, "this will help you find your way." Running Wolf had never understood what his grandfather meant. Until now, he had never been truly lost. As the morning sun climbed higher, he carefully rewrapped the herbs, returned everything to the pouch, and continued his journey. Each step sent pain shooting through his side. The wound wasn't healing properly. He knew the signs of infection. Without proper medicine, it would eventually kill him, perhaps before the thirst or hunger could claim him. By midday, the sun had become an enemy more dangerous than any soldier. Running Wolf's thoughts turned to his son, Little Beaver, only 5 winters old, but already showing the makings of a hunter, and his wife, Morning Rain, whose smile could chase away even the darkest storm clouds in his heart. Had they escaped? Or had they fallen like so many others? Not knowing was its own kind of torture. When he stumbled, the medicine pouch swung against his chest, reminding him of its presence, of his promise to survive, to remember. Night brought little relief from the heat. The desert rocks, releasing the day's warmth in steady waves. Running Wolf found shelter beneath a small outcropping, curling his body into the shadows. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and his water skin held only a few precious drops. As he closed his eyes, fingers wrapped around his medicine pouch, Running Wolf whispered the names of those he had lost. A prayer, a remembrance, a promise. Each name a star in the darkness, guiding him forward. Tomorrow would bring more heat, more pain, more hunger, but it would also bring him one day closer to whatever fate the spirits had prepared for him. Whether that was death under the merciless sun, or something else entirely, Running Wolf would meet it as he had met every challenge in his life, with his medicine pouch against his heart, the wisdom of his ancestors in his mind, and the names of his loved ones on his lips. Captain James Harrove pulled his pocket watch from his vest, thumb brushing over the engraved silver case that bore his family crest. 6 hours since they'd picked up the Apache's trail. 6 hours of relentless pursuit under the punishing sun. "Sir," Lieutenant Ellis approached, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "Scouts report blood sign. The savage is wounded." Harrove nodded, clicking open the watch. The timepiece had been his father's, and his grandfather's before that. 3 generations of military men, all serving with distinction. The watch had kept time through the Mexican War, the Civil War, and now the Apache campaigns. "How far ahead?" Harrove asked, watching the second hand make its steady journey. "Half-day's ride at most, sir." "He's slowing down." Harrove snapped the watch closed, the familiar click like the sound of a hammer being cocked. "Then we're gaining. No rest until nightfall." The men were tired, horses lathered with sweat, but Harrove would not relent. This Apache, this Running Wolf as the scout had named him, was the last survivor of the band that had raided Henderson settlement last month. 12 settlers dead, including a woman and 2 children. Harrove had orders to ensure no warrior escaped justice. At least, that was the official reason for this pursuit. The watch in his pocket carried a heavier burden, the real reason he drove his men so hard. As they mounted up, Hargrove's mind drifted back to that day, not the village raid 3 days ago, but a different day, 15 years earlier. The day his younger brother Thomas, fresh from West Point, led his first patrol into Apache territory and never returned. They found what remained of Thomas and his men 2 weeks later. Harrove had identified his brother by this very watch, somehow overlooked by those who stripped the bodies. Since that day, Harrove had carried more than a timepiece. He carried a debt that could only be paid in blood. "Water's getting low, sir," Sergeant Dawson reported as they rode. "Men are asking if we'll turn back soon." Harrove didn't answer immediately. Instead, he squinted at the horizon, at the shimmering heat waves that made the landscape dance. Somewhere out there, a wounded Apache was trying to outrun death. But death wore a blue coat and carried a silver pocket watch, ticking away the minutes of the warrior's remaining life. "We continue," Harrove finally said, "until it's finished." The day stretched on, the sun crawling across the sky with agonizing slowness. Twice they lost the trail when the Apache crossed rocky ground. But their scout, a Navajo who held no love for the Apache, found it again. The blood signs were getting fresher. The warrior was weakening. When they made camp that night, Harrove sat apart from his men, watch in hand. He opened and closed it repeatedly, the action as automatic as breathing. Open, close, open, close, each click marking another moment closer to his goal. Lieutenant Ellis approached cautiously, offering a tin cup of coffee. "The men are wondering, sir," he said, choosing his words carefully. "This pursuit, it seems excessive for one Apache." Hargrove's fingers stilled on the watch. "You weren't at Henderson settlement, Lieutenant. You didn't see what they did." "No, sir. But I was at the village 3 days ago." Ellis paused. "What we did there, it didn't feel like justice, sir." Hargrove's eyes hardened. "Justice is not our concern, Lieutenant. Orders are." "Yes, sir." Ellis hesitated. "It's just, some of the men are saying this feels personal." Harrove stood abruptly, pocketing his watch. "Tell the men we break camp before dawn." Anyone not ready rides without breakfast. Alone again, Harrove pulled out the watch one last time, opening it to reveal not just the clock face, but the small portrait hidden inside the cover. Thomas, forever young, forever smiling, forever 22 years old. Soon, he whispered to the image, I promise you, brother. Soon, morning came all too quickly. As predicted, they found fresher sign. The Apache had veered east, into territory even the Navajo scout seemed reluctant to enter. Bad place, the scout said, pointing to strange rock formations in the distance. Old spirits, old magic. Harrove scoffed. There's no such thing as magic. Just men and the choices they make. His hand moved to his pocket, feeling the solid weight of the watch. And this man has chosen to run where he shouldn't. The scout shook his head, but said nothing more as they continued their pursuit, hoofbeats keeping time with the ticking of the hidden watch, counting down the moments until destiny arrived for both hunter and hunted. The third day in the desert brought delirium. Running Wolf stumbled forward, each step an act of defiance against the death that stalked him more surely than any blue-coated soldier. The wound in his side had turned an angry red, heat radiating from it like a small sun beneath his skin. When he first saw the stone marker, he believed it to be another mirage, like the water pools that had vanished upon approach throughout the morning. But as he drew closer, the marker remained solid, a weathered stone pillar, rising from the cracked earth, adorned with symbols he had never seen before. Running Wolf traced his fingers over the carvings. They were not Apache signs, nor those of any tribe he recognized. Circles within circles, spiraling lines, and strange angular figures that seemed to dance across the stone's surface. At the top, a symbol that resembled a massive canine creature stood guard. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "What do you guard?" The stone offered no answer, but something about it called to him, a familiarity he couldn't place, like a word forgotten, but resting just beyond reach. Running Wolf sank to his knees beside the marker. The small shade it provided a mercy in the relentless heat. Perhaps this was where he would die. Not a bad place, marked by something ancient and enduring. Better than falling to Harrove's men. At least, he closed his eyes, allowing exhaustion to wash over him. He dreamed, or perhaps it wasn't a dream at all, but something else. A vision sent by the stone itself. In it he saw a long line of figures, stretching into the distance, each carrying a burden. At the head of the line stood a massive dog, its eyes reflecting starlight. The procession moved toward mountains that didn't exist in any land. Running Wolf knew. When he opened his eyes, the sun had moved. How long had he slept? An hour? More. Running Wolf forced himself to stand, swaying slightly. Dying here would be a surrender. He would not surrender. Beyond the marker, barely visible in the shimmering distance, stood another stone, and beyond that he thought he could make out a third. A path, then. But to where? Without conscious decision, Running Wolf began following the markers. Each stood approximately 1,000 paces from the last, each bearing the same strange symbols. By the fourth stone, he noticed something odd. Small offerings placed at the base, faded cloth bundles, weathered bone beads, arrowheads of unusual design, offerings from travelers who had passed this way before. How long ago, and who were they? No Apache had ever spoken of these stones, or what they might lead to. Yet someone had known. Someone had traveled this path, and left these tokens of respect. At the sixth marker, Running Wolf stopped short. This one was different, larger than the others, and bearing a new symbol prominently at its center. A perfect circle, with radiating lines, like a sun, but not a sun. Something about it triggered a memory from his childhood. His grandfather, telling stories around the fire, speaking of places where the world grew thin, where the barriers between this realm and others could be crossed. The old ones knew how to find these places, his grandfather had said. They marked them with signs that only the worthy could follow. At the time, Running Wolf had thought it merely a story to entertain children. Now, he wondered, as the day waned, bringing merciful coolness with approaching dusk, Running Wolf reached what he sensed was the final marker. It stood taller than the others, its surface covered entirely with spiraling patterns that seemed to move if watched too closely. At its base lay not simple offerings, but elaborate ones. Bundles of herbs bound with sinew, small carved figures of unknown materials, beads of shells from oceans Running Wolf had never seen. Beyond this last sentinel stone, rising from the desert floor like a mirage that refused to vanish, stood what could only be the destination the markers had been guiding him toward. Ancient walls of stone, partially collapsed but still bearing the dignity of something built to endure centuries. A structure unlike any Running Wolf had seen in all his travels. A temple. There was no other word for it. As the last light of day painted the ruins in gold, Running Wolf felt something stir within him. Recognition, though he had never seen this place before. The markers had led him here for a reason. Whether that reason meant life or death remained to be seen. With the last of his strength, Running Wolf moved toward the temple entrance, where a deeper shadow suggested an opening. Only when he drew closer did the shadow resolve itself into something else entirely, something massive and alive, watching his approach with eyes that reflected the dying light, like twin flames. The Guardian had been waiting for him. The massive dog stood motionless in the temple entrance, a living statue carved, dawn, shadow, and starlight. Running Wolf froze, his hand instinctively moving toward his knife before falling away. He had no strength left for fighting, and something told him this was no ordinary adversary. The animal's size alone marked it as something beyond nature's usual boundaries. Standing as tall as a man's chest, with shoulders broader than a mountain lion's, the dog resembled the wolves of the Northern Territories, but larger, more powerful. Its coat was the color of midnight, broken by scars that created patterns across its muscled body, testament to battles, fought and survived. But it was the eyes that held Running Wolf transfixed. Golden, almost luminous in the fading light, they reflected an intelligence that went beyond animal awareness. Those eyes studied him, measured him, judged him, and around the creature's massive neck, partially hidden by thick fur, was a collar unlike any Running Wolf had seen. Not leather, but what appeared to be woven metal links of gold and silver, inlaid with small stones that caught what little light remained. At its center hung a medallion bearing the same circular symbol he had seen on the final marker. The dog growled, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, but made no move to attack. Instead, it shifted slightly, blocking the entrance more fully. Running Wolf sank to his knees, not in submission but because his legs could no longer support him. Hunger, thirst, and the infection in his wound had taken their toll. If this was to be his end, torn apart by this guardian beast, at least it would be quick. Better than the slow death that had stalked him across the desert. "I seek only shelter," Running Wolf said, his voice barely audible. "Food, water, then I will leave this place." The dog's head tilted slightly, as if considering his words. Running Wolf noticed more details of the collar, symbols etched into each metal link, similar to those on the stone markers. This was no ordinary adornment placed by human hands. This was something that spoke of purpose, of connection to the temple itself. Running Wolf reached for his medicine pouch, moving slowly to avoid triggering the beast's predatory instincts. He withdrew the small bundle of sage and sweetgrass his grandfather had given him. If ever there was a time for its power, it was now. "My grandfather said this would help me find my way when all seemed lost," he said, holding the bundle before him. "I am lost now. I ask for guidance." The dog's nostrils flared, sampling the scent of the sacred herbs. Something changed in its posture, a subtle relaxation, a shift from guardian, something else. Slowly it moved forward, each paw placed with deliberate care, until it stood directly before Running Wolf. Up close, the collar was even more remarkable. What he had taken for gold and silver proved to be metals of colors he had no names for. The stones set within glowed with an inner light that seemed impossible. In the medallion at the center, he could now see it was not simply a circle with radiating lines, but an intricate map of stars arranged in a pattern he recognized from winter skies. The dog lowered its massive head, bringing the collar to Running Wolf's eye level. An invitation? A test? Running Wolf hesitated, then slowly extended his hand, fingers trembling with exhaustion, and touched the medallion. Images flooded his mind, too fast, too numerous to comprehend. Flashes of the temple in different times, under different skies, people of many tribes entering, leaving, some staying. The dog, no, many dogs, generation upon generation, all wearing the same collar, all standing guard, and beneath it all, a sense of purpose so profound it made his heart ache. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun. Running Wolf found himself still kneeling before the dog, his fingers still touching the medallion. But something had changed. The dog's eyes now held recognition, almost welcome. Slowly, with a grace that belied its size, the guardian stepped aside, clearing the path to the temple entrance. Running Wolf understood. He had been granted passage, so whether by the herbs, by his need, or by something the dog had seen within him, he had been deemed worthy to enter. With the last of his strength, Running Wolf pulled himself to his feet. The wound in his side screamed in protest, but he forced himself forward, past the massive guardian. As he crossed the threshold into the temple's cool darkness, he felt the dog fall into step behind him, no longer blocking his path, but accompanying him. The collar jingled softly with each step, a sound like distant bells that echoed through the ancient corridors. It seemed to say, "You are not the first to walk this path. You will not be the last. But for now, in this moment, this place is yours to discover." And somewhere deep within the temple, a light began to glow. The temple's interior enveloped Running Wolf in blessed coolness after the desert's punishing heat. His eyes, accustomed to harsh sunlight, took moments to adjust to the dimness. When they did, he gasped despite his parched throat. The walls surrounding him were alive with color. Massive paintings covered every surface, preserved by the dry air and protected from sun and weather. Unlike the crude pictographs his people sometimes left on canyon walls, these were rendered with extraordinary skill and vivid pigments that seemed impossibly fresh. They glowed with an inner light that illuminated the corridor without torch or fire. Each careful step sent pain shooting through his wounded side, but the paintings drew him forward, compelling his attention despite his suffering. The first scene showed people resembling Apache, others from tribes Running Wolf recognized, Navajo, Pueblo, tribes from the plains and mountain. They gathered around central figures that were not quite human, taller, their features subtly different, radiating power depicted by lines of light surrounding their forms. His grandfather had spoken of them, beings who had descended from the stars in the time before time, who had taught the first people how to live in harmony with the earth. Running Wolf had always considered these tales metaphors, not literal truth. Yet here they were, depicted with such detail and conviction that doubt seemed foolish. The paintings told a story that unfolded as he moved deeper into the temple, the sky people showing humans how to find water, how to identify healing plants, how to track animals, then scenes of great gatherings, with representatives from many tribes meeting in peace, under the sky people's guidance. At their center stood a massive dog, identical to his companion, and behind it, a temple that could only be this very structure. "This place was known to my people," Running Wolf said, his voice echoing slightly in the corridor. "Known and then forgotten. How?" The dog made no sound but continued forward, leading him to a chamber where the corridor widened. Here the paintings took on a darker tone. They showed conflict, tribes fighting against tribes, against strange pale-skinned figures with metal weapons. The sky people were absent from these scenes. Instead, the temple stood alone, with the dog guarding its entrance as flames and chaos surrounded it. Running Wolf recognized the story being told, the coming of the white man, the fracturing of tribal alliances, the loss of ancient knowledge as survival became the only priority. His own people featured prominently in several scenes, warriors fighting desperately against mounted soldiers. The final painting in the sequence showed a single Apache figure approaching the temple, guided by stone markers across the desert. The figure was wounded, hunted, desperate, a mirror image of Running Wolf himself. "This cannot be," he murmured, reaching out to touch the painting. The pigments felt warm beneath his fingers, almost alive. "This was painted long ago, yet it shows me wand." The dog whined softly, drawing his attention away from the disturbing image. It nudged him toward a small alcove he hadn't noticed, partially hidden behind a fallen column. Within the alcove stood a stone shelf holding clay vessels sealed with wax. Driven by instinct or perhaps guided by the painting's influence, Running Wolf broke the seal on one container. Inside was a dark liquid that smelled of honey and herbs. He hesitated only briefly before drinking. The liquid spread warmth through his body, dulling the pain of his wound and clearing the fog of exhaustion from his mind. A second vessel contained dried meat and fruits, preserved somehow across unknowable years. Running Wolf ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling strength returning to his limbs. All the while the paintings seemed to watch him, their colors shifting subtly in the strange light. When he had eaten his fill, Running Wolf turned back to the paintings, seeing them with clearer eyes. They were more than decoration or historical record. They were a message left for him, preparation for something he did not yet understand. When he had done so, it rose and moved toward a doorway partially obscured by shadows, a doorway that led deeper into the temple's heart. Running Wolf glanced once more at the painting of himself, then at the preceding scenes showing centuries of tribal history. Whatever had brought him here, chance, destiny, or the will of powers beyond his understanding, he was now part of this place's ongoing story. With renewed strength from the ancient revisions, Running Wolf followed the guardian dog through the doorway, leaving the watchful paintings behind. Ahead, he could hear strange sounds, not threatening, but unlike anything in his experience. Rhythmic, almost musical, rising and falling like breath. The temple was alive, and it was calling to him. "We'll make camp here," Captain Harrove ordered, dismounting as the last light faded from the sky. No fires. His men, exhausted from the day's relentless ascents, dismounted gratefully. All except two birds, the Navajo scout, who remained on his horse, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where strange rock formations jutted against the darkening sky. "You, Scout," Harrove approached him. "What troubles you?" Two birds pointed toward the formations. "Bad place. Ancient place. We should go around." Hargrove's jaw tightened. "The Apache went that way?" "Yes," two birds admitted reluctantly. "But then so do we." Harrove cut him off. At first light, as the men established camp, Lieutenant Ellis approached his commander. "The scout seems genuinely frightened, sir. Perhaps there's something to his concerns." Harrove scoffed. "Superstition, nothing more." "Still," Ellis pressed, "the men are talking. They say these lands don't appear on any maps, that tribes avoid this region for good reason." "We're soldiers, Lieutenant, not medicine men. We follow orders, not ghost stories." Ellis nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. "Yes, sir." Meanwhile, deep within the temple, Running Wolf followed the guardian dog through winding corridors that seemed to spiral downward. The strange sounds grew louder, rhythmic, pulsing, like a massive heartbeat echoing through stone. They entered a circular chamber that took Running Wolf's breath away. Unlike the painted corridors, this room was stark in its simplicity. Smooth stone walls curved cupid to form a domed ceiling where a single opening admitted a shaft of moonlight. The beam illuminated the chamber's center, where a raised stone platform held a single object, a ceremonial bowl. Running Wolf approached slowly, The bowl was unlike any he had seen, carved from a single piece of translucent stone that seemed to capture and amplify the moonlight. Its surface bore intricate engravings that shifted and changed as he moved around it, within a dark substance, not liquid, not solid, but something between, moved with the same rhythmic pulsing that filled the chamber. The guardian dog sat at the platform's edge, watching expectantly. Running Wolf circled the bowl, studying the engravings. He recognized symbols used in Apache healing ceremonies, but intermingled with unknown designs that stirred half-remembered dreams. The bowl's edge was stained with the residue of countless herbs burned within it over uncounted years. As he leaned closer, familiar scents rose from the bowl: sage, sweetgrass, cedar, and others he couldn't name, but that reminded him of his grandfather's medicine pouch. This was a place of power, of connection between worlds. A memory surfaced, his grandfather guiding his small hands to crush dried herbs between his fingers, teaching him the prayers that accompanied each sacred plant. "The smoke carries our words to the ancestors," his grandfather had explained. "They listen, they guide, they protect." Running Wolf's fingers traced the bowl's rim. This was no ordinary ceremonial vessel. The residue of thousands of prayers clung to it, accumulated over generations. Prayers from different peoples, different times, all focused through this singular point of connection. Without conscious thought, Running Wolf reached for his medicine pouch, withdrawing his grandfather's herb bundle. Something compelled him to crumble a pinch of the dried plants into the bowl. As the herbs touched the dark substance within, they ignited without flame, releasing tendrils of fragrant smoke that spiraled upward through the moonbeam. The rhythmic pulsing intensified. The guardian dog's eyes gleamed in the strange light, and Running Wolf felt a presence, many presences, gathering around him, not threatening, but watchful, expectant. "I am Running Wolf, son of Black Mountain, grandson of Talks with Spirits," he said into the silence, the traditional introduction when entering another tribe's sacred space. "I come seeking shelter, healing, and guidance." The smoke from the bowl formed patterns in the air, shapes that resembled human figures, animal spirits, and finally, the same star pattern he had seen on the guardian dog's collar. The rhythm in the chamber synchronized with his heartbeat, binding him to this place, this moment. Knowledge flowed into him, not in words but in understanding. This temple had stood for countless generations as a sanctuary for all peoples, a repository of wisdom, a place where the barriers between worlds thinned. The bowl was its heart, a vessel through which countless healers, visionaries, and leaders had communed with forces beyond the physical realm. And now, whether by chance or design, he had become part of that lineage. As the smoke dissipated, Running Wolf felt something change within his wounded side. The pain receded, replaced by a warm, tingling sensation. He lifted his shirt to find the angry red infection fading before his eyes, the wound closing, healing at an impossible rate. The guardian dog rose, moving to stand beside him. Its presence felt different now, not merely a guide, but a companion, bound to him through the ritual he had unknowingly performed. Beyond the chamber walls, Running Wolf sensed other presences stirring within the temple. He was no longer alone with the dog. The sanctuary was awakening, responding to his arrival, to his offering, to the prayer carried in smoke from the ceremonial bowl. Running Wolf slept deeply for the first time since fleeing his village, his body surrendering to healing and exhaustion in equal measure. He dreamed of ancestors walking beside him through the temple corridors, their faces both familiar and strange, their voices a murmur just beyond comprehension. When he woke, the guardian dog lay curled beside him, its massive head resting on massive paws. At Running Wolf's stirring, it opened golden eyes, regarding him with what could only be described as recognition. "You stayed," Running Wolf said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. The healing ritual had done more than close his wound. It had restored him in ways he was still discovering. The dog rose and stretched, then padded to the chamber entrance, looking back expectantly. Running Wolf followed, noting with wonder how the pain in his side had diminished to a dull ache. His legs, too, felt renewed, no longer trembling with exhaustion and hunger. The dog led him through passages he hadn't noticed before, moving with purpose. They passed chambers filled with artifacts, weapons of ancient design, pottery from distant tribes, strange devices whose purposes he couldn't guess. Finally, they entered a small circular room where morning light filtered through cleverly placed openings in the ceiling. At the room's center, resting on a stone pedestal, lay a flute, unlike any Running Wolf had seen. Fashioned from bone, larger than any animal he knew, it was adorned with intricate carvings and inlaid with materials that caught the light in unexpected ways. Small holes ran its length, positioned differently than the wooden flutes his people crafted. The dog sat beside the pedestal, its gaze alternating between Running Wolf and the instrument. "You want me to play it?" Running Wolf asked, approaching cautiously. He had some skill with music. His grandfather had taught him simple melodies to accompany healing ceremonies and celebration dances, but this instrument seemed to demand something more. When he lifted the flute, it felt warm to his touch, as if recently played. It was lighter than expected, balanced perfectly in his hands. The bone was smooth, polished by countless hands over countless years. Running Wolf brought the flute to his lips, hesitated, then played a simple note. The sound that emerged was unlike anything he had heard before, pure, resonant, seeming to fill not just the room but his entire being. It hung in the air long after his breath stopped, then transformed, splitting into harmonies that no single instrument should produce. The walls of the chamber appeared to respond, vibrating subtly with the lingering tone. Dust motes in the sunbeams began to dance in patterns, not random movements, but organized forms that resembled the symbols on the stone markers that had guided him to the temple. Emboldened, Running Wolf played another note, then another, letting instinct guide his fingers to positions he hadn't been taught. A melody formed, ancient and new simultaneously. He recognized elements of Apache healing songs interwoven with unknown phrases that somehow felt right, necessary. As the music filled the chamber, something extraordinary happened. The stone walls became transparent, revealing not the adjacent rooms he had passed through, but visions of distant places and times. He saw great gatherings of tribes in peace, battles fought under strange skies, the temple itself in various stages of construction, use and decay. And he saw himself, not as he was now, but as he might become. Stronger, adorned with symbols of authority he didn't recognize, leading people through desert paths with the guardian dog at his side. The guardian dog itself seemed transformed by the music. Its fur rippled with patterns of light that matched the rhythm of the melody. Its eyes reflected not just the present chamber, but the visions in the walls. When Running Wolf finally lowered the flute, the visions faded gradually, the walls becoming solid once more. But something had changed. He felt connected to the temple in a way that transcended physical presence, as if he had always been here, would always be here, even when he eventually departed. This place chooses its guardians, he realized aloud. The dog, the flute, the bowl, they're not just objects, they're keys. The guardian dog made a sound, not quite a bark, not quite a howl, that seemed to confirm his understanding. Then it turned, leading him toward yet another unexplored passage. As they walked, Running Wolf kept the flute in his hand, certain now that it had been waiting for him, just as the temple had been waiting, just as the guardian dog had been waiting. Outside, in the growing heat of morning, Captain Harrove mounted his horse and gestured for his men to follow. The Navajo scout moved reluctantly, eyeing the distant stone formations with undisguised fear. By sundown, Harrove promised his lieutenant, "We'll have our Apache," but inside the temple, guided by ancient music and forgotten knowledge, Running Wolf was becoming something more than just an Apache warrior, something that even Harrove, with all his determination, might not recognize, something the temple had been preparing for longer than any living memory could recall. The passageway narrowed as Running Wolf followed the guardian dog deeper into the temple's heart. The air grew noticeably cooler, with a moisture that felt alien after days in the desert. Sound changed, too. A gentle whisper like distant voices speaking in hushed tones, punctuated by a rhythmic dripping that echoed through the stone corridors. They descended a spiraling staircase carved directly into bedrock, worn smooth by countless feet over countless years. Running Wolf ran his fingers along the wall as he walked, feeling the transition from worked stone to natural rock. The temple hadn't been entirely built, it had been discovered, enhanced, preserved. The staircase ended abruptly, opening into a vast underground chamber that took Running Wolf's breath away. Overhead, the ceiling rose into darkness, beyond the reach of the chamber's ambient blue-green light. That light emanated from the chamber's center, a spring of water so clear it seemed almost invisible, except for its luminescence. The sacred spring occupied a natural basin in the chamber floor, its surface perfectly still despite the water that must flow into and out of it. Around its circumference stood stone pillars, carved with the now familiar symbols Running Wolf had seen throughout the temple. But here, the carvings were inlaid with materials that caught the spring's light, making them appear to float above the stone surface. The guardian dog approached the spring, drinking deeply from a specific spot along its edge. It then looked at Running Wolf, clearly expecting him to do the same. Running Wolf knelt at the spring's edge, his reflection looking back at him, but not quite his reflection. The face that gazed up seemed older, wiser, marked with ceremonial paint he did not wear. He hesitated, then plunged his hands into the water. Cold shot through him, but not unpleasantly. It was the cold of mountain streams in spring, of life renewed after winter's grip. He brought the water to his lips and drank. The effect was immediate and profound. The water tasted of minerals from deep within the earth, but also of something else, something that reminded him of his grandfather's most potent medicine. It coursed through him like liquid starlight, illuminating his body from within. The remaining stiffness in his wounded side vanished completely. His vision sharpened, colors intensifying. Even the air seemed suddenly rich with scents he had never noticed before. "What is this place?" he whispered, though he already sensed the answer. Stories told around tribal fires spoke of hidden waters that could heal any wound, restore any spirit, places where the boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm grew thin, sacred springs that had been visited by the sky people in ancient times, forever changed by their presence. Running Wolf removed his shirt and examined his side. Not even a scar remained where the cavalry bullet had torn through him. He cupped more water in his hands, this time pouring it over his head. It ran down his body in rivulets that seemed to absorb the dust and weariness of his journey, leaving him renewed. The guardian dog moved to a flat stone beside the spring, where depressions held dried herbs and minerals. It looked meaningfully at Running Wolf, then at the items, then back at the spring. Understanding came instinctively. Running Wolf took pinches of the various substances and cast them into the water. As each touched the surface, the spring's glow intensified, and images formed in the depths. Not reflections, but visions. He saw his village, as it had been before the attack. Children playing, elders teaching, warriors practicing. Then the vision shifted to show scattered groups of survivors. His people, alive, hiding in mountains to the west. Among them, incredibly, his wife and son, wounded but healing. Joy surged through him, then determination. They lived. He was not the last. The vision shifted again, showing Captain Harrove and his men riding toward the temple, now less than half a day's journey away. The spring's light dimmed, as if troubled by their approach. A final vision formed. Running Wolf standing at the temple entrance, the guardian dog beside him, facing the soldiers. But he was not as he was now. He wore ceremonial markings, held items of power from the temple, stood with an azimuth that transcended tribal boundaries. The vision dissolved as the herbs and minerals dissipated in the water. Running Wolf sat back on his heels, understanding flowing through him with the clarity of the spring itself. This was not merely a place of refuge, it was a place of transformation. The temple had called to him across the desert, not simply to save his life, but because it needed him, as he needed it. The sacred spring had shown him past, present, and a possible future. His people survived, but remained in danger, and Harrove approached, bringing threat to both the temple and any hope of reunion with his family. Running Wolf looked at his companion, seeing the guardian dog, with new eyes. "We have work to do," he said. The dog's golden eyes gleamed with agreement as it led him away from the spring, upward toward chambers they had not yet explored. Chambers that Running Wolf now understood contained what he would need for the confrontation to come. The guardian dog led Running Wolf through a passage he hadn't noticed before, concealed behind a shifting panel that responded to the dog's presence. Unlike the grand ceremonial spaces or the ancient painted corridors, this new area felt intimate, lived in, quarters meant for habitation rather than ritual. Simple sleeping pallets lined one wall, preserved somehow against time's decay. Storage niches held clay vessels, wooden implements, and items of daily life, whose purposes were immediately recognizable despite their unusual designs. A small hearth occupied the center of the space, its stones still bearing the carbon stains of fires long extinguished. "Someone lived here," Running Wolf said aloud. "Many someones." The guardian dog moved to a particular sleeping area, separated slightly from the others. Beside it stood a simple wooden stand, holding a single item, not a weapon, not a ceremonial object, but a walking staff, the kind carried by tribal elders who had earned the right to lean upon wisdom rather than strength. Yet this was no ordinary elder's staff. Approximately the height of a tall man, it was crafted from a wood Running Wolf didn't recognize, darker than cedar, lighter than mesquite, with a grain that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Most remarkable were the markings carved into its length. Running Wolf recognized symbols from many tribes: Apache, Navajo, Pueblo, Comanche, and others from peoples he had only heard described in stories. Each symbol flowed into the next, creating a continuous narrative that spiraled around the staff from base to tip. At the staff's top, a single crystal was set into the wood, secured by intricate silver wirework. The crystal caught the chamber's dim light, refracting it into colors that shifted as Running Wolf moved around it. The guardian dog sat beside the stand, looking expectantly at Running Wolf, then at the staff, in clear invitation. Running Wolf hesitated. Among his people, an elder's staff was sacred. Personal. To touch another's without permission was deeply disrespectful. Yet the staff's owner was long gone, and the dog's expectation was unmistakable. "If this is meant for me," Running Wolf said, addressing the temple itself as much as the dog, "I accept the responsibility it represents." He grasped the staff. Instantly, his mind filled with the presence of another consciousness, not invasive, but enveloping, like stepping into a river of memory. He saw through eyes not his own. A man, ancient even when he came to the temple, the last of a line of keepers stretching back to when the sky people still walked the earth. The keeper had watched tribes rise and fall, alliances form and fracture, peoples migrate across landscapes that changed with them. He had welcomed those who found the temple, taught them, healed them, sent them back to their peoples with knowledge and warnings, and always, at his side, the guardian dog. Not one dog, but many across the years, each a descendant of the first companion given to the first keeper by the sky people themselves. As Running Wolf experienced these memories, he understood the staff's purpose. It was not merely a walking aid, but a repository, each symbol carved by a different keeper, recording their stewardship, preserving their wisdom for those who followed. The crystal at its crown was the key that unlocked these memories, a gift from the sky people that bridged the gap between individual minds across time. The last keeper had known he would be the last of his line, had known the temple would stand empty for a time as the world outside changed violently. had prepared for a future keeper who would come not by training and selection, but by desperate need and cosmic timing. Had prepared for Running Wolf. The vision faded, leaving Running Wolf standing in the simple quarters, staff in hand, the weight of generations of knowledge settling into his consciousness. Not all was accessible immediately. That would take time, meditation, guidance from the guardian dog who had served so many keepers before him. But certain knowledge stood out with crystal clarity. How to access the temple's deeper chambers, how to use its defensive capabilities, how to communicate with the guardian dog beyond simple commands and intuition, and most importantly, how to recognize the signs that had guided his arrival. The attack on his village, his wound, and desperate flight, Hargrove's pursuit, all had driven him precisely where and when he needed to be. Not mere chance, but patterns set in motion long ago. "I understand," Running Wolf told the guardian dog, who regarded him with knowing eyes. "The temple chose me as I chose it." He tested the staff's weight, finding it perfectly balanced in his hand. The wood seemed to warm to his touch, the symbols glowing faintly as if recognizing his acceptance of their meaning. The guardian dog rose and moved toward another concealed doorway, looking back expectantly. Running Wolf followed, staff in hand, stepping not just through the physical passage, but into a role countless others had filled before him. Behind them in the keeper's quarters, the small hearth suddenly flickered with flame, though no one had lit it, the temple acknowledging its new guardian's acceptance. And outside, drawing ever closer, Captain Hargrove led his men toward the same destination, unaware that what awaited him was no longer a desperate Apache fugitive, but something far more ancient and powerful. The guardian dog led Running Wolf to a chamber unlike any they had yet visited, where other rooms had been built with clear purpose for ceremony, habitation, or storage. This space felt organic, as if the temple had grown it rather than craftsmen carving it. The circular chamber was lined with crystalline formations that protruded from the walls at various heights and angles. They ranged in size from tiny shards no larger than a fingernail to massive columns that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each crystal emitted a soft glow in different hues: amber, azure, violet, emerald, creating a constellation of colors that shifted subtly as Running Wolf moved through the space. These were not mere decorative elements. Running Wolf could feel energy emanating from them, similar to what he had experienced with the Elder's staff, but multiplied hundredfold. The air itself seemed charged, making the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. "What are these?" he asked, though he wasn't expecting a verbal answer. The guardian dog approached one of the medium-sized crystals, a blue-white formation at approximately the height of Running Wolf's heart, and sat before it expectantly. Running Wolf moved to join his companion, studying the crystal's surface. Unlike natural formations he had seen in caves, these crystals were perfectly clear, their facets too precise to be the work of nature alone. Instinctively he reached out and placed his palm against the cool surface. The world disappeared. He stood in a landscape he didn't recognize. Grasslands stretching to distant mountains beneath a sky filled with stars in unfamiliar patterns. Before him, a man dressed in garments of a tribe Running Wolf had never encountered performed a ritual around a fire. Though Running Wolf could see and hear everything with perfect clarity, the man showed no awareness of his presence. As suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. Running Wolf found himself back in the crystal chamber, hands still pressed against the blue-white formation, breath coming in short gasps. "Memory stones," he whispered, understanding flowing into him, partly from the Elder's staff's knowledge and partly from deep intuition. "They hold moments." The guardian dog moved to another crystal, this one with an amber glow. Again Running Wolf touched its surface. Again he was transported, this time to a battlefield where Apache warriors fought alongside Navajo against Spanish conquistadors, their forces united to repel the invaders with their strange weapons and stranger gods. Crystal after crystal revealed its contents to Running Wolf's touch. He witnessed births and deaths, peace councils and war parties, ceremonies so ancient their meanings had been lost to all but the temple's memory. Each stone contained not just images, but complete sensory experiences, sounds, smells, emotions preserved with perfect fidelity across centuries. Then he found a stone that stopped him cold, a small green crystal tucked between larger formations that pulsed with a familiar rhythm. When he touched it, he saw his grandfather, not as the old man he remembered, but as a young warrior in his prime. His grandfather stood at the temple entrance, being greeted by an elderly keeper and a guardian dog indistinguishable from Running Wolf's companion. "He was here," Running Wolf breathed as the vision ended. "My grandfather knew this place." The guardian dog made a soft sound of confirmation, then led him to the chamber's center, where a formation unlike the others waited. Rather than a single crystal, this was a cluster of smaller stones arranged in a pattern that resembled a map of the night sky. At its center, a depression in the stone floor waited, perfectly sized to hold the base of the elder's staff. Running Wolf placed the staff in the depression. Immediately, the crystalline formations throughout the chamber intensified their glow, and a new vision enveloped him, not from any single stone, but from all of them simultaneously. He saw the land as if from a great height, soldiers approaching the temple, his scattered people, hiding in mountain caves, and spreading outward from these immediate concerns, a wave of change moving across the continent. Railroads cutting through sacred lands, great herds of buffalo falling to endless rifle fire, tribes being pushed ever westward or contained on barren reservations. The vision was not of the past, but of the future, a warning formed from the collected wisdom of all who had come before. The memory stones were showing him what would happen if the knowledge preserved in the temple was lost. When the vision faded, Running Wolf stood in the center of the chamber, staff in hand, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a ceremonial robe. The guardian dog pressed against his leg, offering silent support. "The temple doesn't just preserve the past," Running Wolf said, giving voice to his understanding. "It safeguards the future." He looked around at the memory stones, each containing moments of triumph and tragedy, wisdom and folly, all preserved so that those who followed might learn. This was what Harrove and his kind would destroy, not just a building of stone, but the collected experience of countless generations. "We cannot let them take this," he said to the guardian dog. "Not just for my people, but for all people." The guardian dog's golden eyes reflected the colored light of the memory stones as it led Running Wolf from the chamber toward preparations that needed to be made before the soldiers arrived. Behind them, the crystals pulsed in unison, like a multitude of hearts beating with a single purpose. Running Wolf moved with new purpose through the temple corridors, the elder's staff in hand, the guardian dog at his side. The knowledge flowing from the staff's connection guided him to chambers he had not yet visited, revealing the temple's secrets as he needed them. They entered a circular room with 7 doorways spaced evenly around its perimeter. At its center stood a stone pedestal engraved with a pattern of concentric circles. The guardian dog approached the pedestal and waited, its golden eyes reflecting an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the temple itself. Running Wolf joined his companion, studying the pedestal's surface. The engraved circles contained symbols representing different tribal nations. Some he recognized immediately, others known only through the staff's shared memories. Apache, Navajo, Pueblo, Comanche, Cheyenne, Sioux, and many more, arranged not in hierarchy but in harmony, each connected to the others through flowing lines that formed an intricate web. At the pedestal's center lay a medallion approximately the size of his palm, crafted from a metal that resembled silver, but with an iridescence quality that shifted colors in the chamber's light. It bore the same pattern of tribal symbols arranged in perfect unity. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each tiny marking rendered with precision impossible for human hands. Running Wolf reached for the medallion, hesitating just above its surface. The staff's knowledge whispered caution. This was no mere ornament, but a key to the temple's deepest powers. "Is this meant for me as well?" he asked the guardian dog. The animal made a soft sound of affirmation, nudging his hand toward the medallion. Taking a deep breath, Running Wolf lifted it from its resting place. Immediately the room transformed. The 7 doorways glowed with different colored lights: red, yellow, white, black, blue, green, and a 7th that seemed to contain all colors simultaneously. From each emanated sounds, scents and sensations characteristic of different tribal territories: the desert heat of Apache lands, the mountain winds of Navajo mesas, the forest murmurs of eastern woodland. The medallion warmed in Running Wolf's palm, its tribal symbols illuminating in sequence. Then all at once, through the staff's connection, understanding flowed. This was the tribal unity symbol, created when the temple was first established as neutral ground, where all peoples could gather in peace. In times of great ceremony, representatives from 7 primary tribal groups would enter through their respective doorways, each bringing knowledge, resources, and wisdom to share. The medallion served as both symbol and tool of this unity, a reminder that despite differences in language, custom, and territory, all were connected in the greater cycle of existence. But the medallion served another purpose, one more immediately relevant to Running Wolf's situation. When worn by the temple's keeper, it activated the sanctuary's defensive capabilities. Not weapons, but protections woven into the very stones by the Sky People's ancient magic. Running Wolf slipped the medallion's chain around his neck. As it settled against his chest, he felt the temple's awareness expand to include him more fully. He could sense the structure's boundaries as if they were extensions of his own body, could feel the approaching vibrations of hoofbeats still miles distant, but drawing ever closer. "They'll be here by sundown," he said to the guardian dog, the medallion somehow translating his words into knowledge the animal could comprehend on a deeper level than before. The dog moved to one of the doorways, the one glowing with red light that carried the scent of desert sage. Running Wolf followed, finding not another chamber, but an ascending passage that led to a part of the temple he hadn't yet explored. They emerged onto a hidden parapet near the temple's summit. From this vantage point, Running Wolf could see for miles across the desert landscape. In the distance, dust rose from Hargrove's approaching party, 7 riders, moving with military precision toward the temple. The medallion pulsed against Running Wolf's chest as he assessed the situation. He was 1 man against 7, but no longer just a hunted Apache warrior. Now he was the temple's keeper, connected to its power, responsible for its protection. With the tribal unity symbol warm against his skin, Running Wolf began preparations for the coming confrontation. The guardian dog moved precisely to positions indicated by subtle gestures, activating defenses built into the temple's structure. Ancient mechanisms awoke from centuries of dormancy, ready to defend the sanctuary's knowledge. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Running Wolf took his place at the temple entrance, staff in hand, medallion at his throat, guardian dog at his side. The knowledge of countless keepers flowed through him, guiding his actions with accumulated wisdom. Captain Harrove would not find the desperate fugitive he expected. Instead, he would face something his military training had never prepared him for. A man standing at the intersection of worlds, protecting something far more precious than his own life. The tribal unity symbol glowed against Running Wolf's chest, connecting him to all who had stood guard before him and all who might come after. Whatever happened next would become part of the temple's memory, preserved in stone and crystal for generations yet unborn. Captain Harrove reined in his horse at the base of the stone markers that formed a path to the temple. The structure loomed ahead, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, its weathered walls somehow both inviting and forbidding. "Dismount," he ordered his men. "We'll approach on foot from here." Lieutenant Ellis eyed the temple warily. "Sir, perhaps we should reconsider," the scout warned. "The scout is a superstitious fool," Harrove cut him off. "Our quarry is here. I can feel it." As the men secured their horses, Harrove removed his canteen and took a careful sip of the precious water. The desert heat had taken its toll on all of them, men and animals alike. This would end today, one way or another. Inside the temple, Running Wolf watched the soldiers through the medallion's enhanced perception. He could sense their fatigue, their uncertainty, all except Harrove, whose determination burned like a beacon in the dying light. The guardian dog growled softly beside him, then moved to a position behind a fallen column. Running Wolf nodded, understanding the strategy suggested by the temple's ancient knowledge. He would not confront the soldiers directly, not yet. First, let the temple work its influence. Harrove adjusted his uniform and checked his sidearm before addressing his men. Lieutenant Ellis, you and Private Jenkins come with me. The rest of you secure the perimeter. If the Apache attempts to flee, shoot to wound if possible. I want him alive to answer for Henderson's settlement. As the soldiers spread out, Harrove, Ellis and Jenkins began their approach to the temple entrance. Running Wolf retreated deeper inside, leaving subtle signs for them to follow. A footprint in dust, a displaced stone, leading them exactly where he wanted them to go. The guardian dog circled around through hidden passages, emerging behind the 3 remaining soldiers. A low growl sent them spinning, weapons raised, but the massive animal had already vanished into the lengthening shadows. Something's out there, one soldier called, voice tight with tension. Just a coyote, another replied, not believing his own words. Inside, Harrove moved cautiously through the entrance chamber, eyes adjusting to the dimness after the harsh desert light. Spread out, he whispered to Ellis and Jenkins. Check each passage. As Jenkins moved toward a side corridor, his foot caught on an uneven stone. He stumbled, his rifle clattering to the floor. When he straightened, something small and leather-bound lay beside the weapon, a book that had fallen from his pack during the stumble. Harrove's journal. Running Wolf, watching from shadow, moved silently to retrieve the item once the soldiers had passed. The book was well worn, its pages filled with neat handwriting, not a military log, but a personal record. Retreating to a secure position, Running Wolf opened the journal, curious what insights it might provide about his pursuer. The medallion around his neck tingled, a warning perhaps, or encouragement to understand his enemy. The journal's early entries were what he might have expected. Terse accounts of military operations, tallies of Apache casualties, described with clinical detachment. But as he turned pages, the tone shifted. Doubts began to appear between the lines of duty. Another village razed today, one entry read. Found mostly women and children. Jenkins vomited afterward. Ellis wouldn't meet my eyes at dinner. Can't blame them. Thomas would have questioned the you'd. Perhaps I should have as well. Further on, Henderson claims Apache raided his cattle, killed his foreman. But his description of events doesn't align with Apache patterns. Something off about the man. Following orders regardless. The most recent entry, dated before the attack on Running Wolf's village, received intelligence that White Mountain Band harboring warriors from Henderson raid. Orders, complete neutralization. No witnesses, too similar to Yellow Creek incident. Argued with Colonel Barrett. Nearly insubordinate. Orders stand. God help me. Running Wolf closed the journal, understanding dawning. Harrove was not a simple villain driven by hatred, but a man caught between duty and conscience. Following orders he increasingly questioned. The knowledge changed nothing about what needed to be done, but perhaps it changed how it might be accomplished. Moving through the temple's hidden passages, Running Wolf returned to his position near the entrance chamber. Harrove and his men had separated further, Jenkins taking the left corridor, Ellis the right, while Harrove continued straight ahead. Perfect. Running Wolf signaled to the guardian dog through their medallion-enhanced connection. The massive animal appeared silently beside Jenkins, who froze in terror at the sight of golden eyes gleaming in the shadows. Before he could shout a warning, the temple's influence washed over him, the memory stones activating remotely through channels built into the wall. Jenkins saw not a dog, but the faces of those who had died in the village raid. Women, children, elders, their expressions not accusatory, but simply present, witnessing his participation in their destruction. His scream echoed through the temple corridors as he fled toward the entrance, past a startled Ellis, out into the desert beyond. One down, two separated. The confrontation was beginning exactly as the temple's ancient strategy suggested. Running Wolf touched the medallion at his throat, feeling the unified wisdom of generations guiding his next move. Hargrove's journal had shown him the man's weakness, and perhaps, unexpectedly, a path to resolution that didn't require more bloodshed. Lieutenant Ellis moved cautiously through the right corridor, nerves frayed by Jenkins' inexplicable scream and sudden flight. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, an inadequate defense against whatever had terrified his fellow soldier. Meanwhile, Hargrove pressed deeper into the temple's central passage, drawn forward by an unshakable certainty that his quarry waited ahead. The corridor opened into a hexagonal chamber whose walls gleamed with an otherworldly luminescence. No visible source provided the light. The stone itself seemed to glow. Running Wolf observed both men from the temple's hidden passages, the guardian dog a silent shadow beside him. Through the medallion's connection, he sensed the temple's energies gathering, preparing for what would come next. The elder's staff thrummed softly in his hand, guiding his steps to a chamber he had not yet entered. The room he found was perfectly circular, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Unlike the ornate spaces with their carvings and paintings, this chamber was stark in its simplicity. Its single feature stood at its center, a vertical disc of polished material that resembled silver, but was somehow both solid and liquid simultaneously. Its surface rippled gently, though no breeze stirred the air. The sacred mirror. Knowledge flowed from staff to keeper. This was the temple's most powerful artifact, created by the Sky People themselves, not a tool for vanity, but a window into truth that showed those who gazed upon it their deepest selves and the consequences of their choices. Running Wolf understood immediately what must happen next. He positioned himself behind the mirror, becoming invisible as the reflective surface captured the chamber's ambient light. The guardian dog took position by the room's only entrance, ready to prevent escape. In the hexagonal chamber, Hargrove noticed a new doorway appearing where moments before had been solid wall. He hesitated, military instincts warning of a trap, but his obsession with completing his mission drove him forward. He stepped through into the circular room, pistol drawn. The sacred mirror dominated his vision, a silvery disc floating apparently unsupported at the chamber's center. Hargrove approached cautiously, seeing his reflection waver and shift on its surface. "I know you're here, Apache," he called, voice echoing in the circular space. "No more running. Face me like a warrior." The reflection in the mirror shifted, but not to reveal Running Wolf's hiding place. Instead, Hargrove found himself staring at a version of himself as a young lieutenant standing beside his brother Thomas before his fateful final patrol. "What devilry is this?" Hargrove whispered, reaching involuntarily toward the image. As his fingers touched the mirror's surface, the scene changed. He saw himself giving the order to attack Running Wolf's village, but now from the perspective of the victims, he felt their terror, their confusion, their pain. He experienced the death of elders who had harmed no one, children who had barely begun to live. Hargrove tried to pull away, but the mirror held him transfixed. The scenes shifted again, showing a possible future. Hargrove returning to the fort, reporting another successful operation, receiving commendation. Then his slow deterioration as guilt corroded his spirit, turning him into a bitter, broken man who found solace only in whiskey and isolation. A final shift showed an alternate path. Hargrove standing with Running Wolf before tribal leaders and military officials, brokering understanding instead of bloodshed. Respected by both sides, helping to build a peace that, while imperfect, prevented countless deaths. Running Wolf stepped from behind the mirror as Hargrove fell to his knees, the pistol dropping from nerveless fingers. The guardian dog moved to block the doorway, ensuring they would not be interrupted. "What have you done to me?" Hargrove asked, voice hoarse. "Not I," Running Wolf replied, speaking English learned during years of forced interaction with white traders. "The mirror shows only truth. What was, what is, what may be." At that moment, Lieutenant Ellis appeared in the doorway, halting abruptly at the sight of the guardian dog. His rifle came up instinctively. "Don't shoot," Hargrove commanded, finding his voice. "Lower your weapon, Lieutenant." Ellis hesitated, confusion evident in his expression, but military discipline prevailed. He lowered his rifle, eyes darting between his captain, the Apache, and the massive dog. Running Wolf remained still, Elder's staff in hand, medallion glowing softly at his throat. He made no threatening move, but his posture conveyed absolute confidence. This was his domain now, his responsibility. "Captain," Ellis ventured. "Jenkins fled. The other men are spooked. What are your orders?" Hargrove rose slowly to his feet, but did not retrieve his pistol. He looked again at the sacred mirror, which now showed only his current reflection, haggard, dust-covered, eyes haunted by what he had seen. "The Apache we've been hunting," Hargrove said carefully. "I believe we've been misinformed about his guilt." Ellis's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Sir?" Hargrove turned to face Running Wolf directly. "You know about Henderson's settlement, the raid attributed to your band?" Running Wolf nodded. "I know we did not attack it. My people were preparing for winter ceremonies when your soldiers came." The sacred mirror's surface rippled, confirming the truth of his words for all to see. Hargrove stared at it, then back at Running Wolf. "What is this place?" he asked, gesturing to encompass not just the chamber, but the entire temple. "Something older and more important than either of us," Running Wolf answered. "Something worth protecting." The mirror's surface shifted again, showing images of the temple's history, its purpose, its significance to all peoples of the region. Both men watched, one with new understanding, one with confirmed responsibility. A crossroads had been reached. The path forward would be determined not by weapons, but by what each man had learned about himself in the reflection of the sacred mirror. The silence in the mirror chamber stretched between the three men, broken only by Hargrove's ragged breathing. The captain's face had gone ashen, his hands trembling slightly as the mirror's revelations continued to reverberate through his mind. "Sir?" Lieutenant Ellis ventured, concerned by his commander's unusual behavior. "Are you unwell?" Hargrove didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the sacred mirror, which now showed only his true reflection, a man confronting the weight of his actions for perhaps the first time. "Lieutenant," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper, "wait outside with the men. Tell them the situation is under control." Ellis hesitated, glancing uncertainly between his captain and Running Wolf. "That's an order, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir." Ellis backed slowly toward the doorway, rifle lowered but ready. The guardian dog made no move to stop him, stepping aside just enough to allow passage. As Ellis disappeared down the corridor, his footsteps echoing into distance, Hargrove slumped against the chamber wall. "What I saw," he began, then faltered. "Was it real or some Apache witchcraft?" Running Wolf regarded him steadily. "The mirror shows only truth. Whether you accept it is your choice." Hargrove's laugh was hollow. "Truth. I've followed orders, done my duty. That was my truth." He gestured toward the mirror. "Until this thing showed me what duty looks like from the other side." The captain's composure cracked further, his military bearing giving way to something raw and human. Running Wolf recognized the symptoms, not physical illness but spirit sickness. Among his people, a person who had committed acts against the natural order of things often fell into such a state. Without proper healing, they might never recover. Running Wolf made a decision. Still holding the elder's staff, he touched the medallion at his throat, silently communicating with the guardian dog. The massive animal padded from the room, returning moments later with a small bundle gripped gently in its jaw. Taking the bundle, Running Wolf unwrapped layers of preserved leaves to reveal a collection of dried plants, minerals and resins, healing herbs gathered from sacred places across many territories, preserved by the temple's magic for generations. Each component had been selected and prepared for specific purposes by keepers long dead, their knowledge flowing now through the elder's staff into Running Wolf's awareness. He knelt and began arranging the materials in a specific pattern on the stone floor before Hargrove. The captain watched warily, but made no move to interfere. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Your spirit is wounded," Running Wolf replied simply. "These will help." Using small amounts from various packets, Running Wolf created a precise mixture in the center of the pack. From another pouch, he produced a coal still glowing with inner heat, despite being carried for days. Fire from the ceremonial bowl, preserved by methods beyond ordinary understanding. When he touched the coal to the herb mixture, it ignited instantly. Rather than fumes, it produced a thick, aromatic smoke that rose in spirals, filling the chamber with scents both soothing and stimulating: sage and sweetgrass, desert creosote and mountain pine, plants from every ecological niche, represented by the tribal symbols on the medallion. The guardian dog settled into a ceremonial position, its golden eyes reflecting the smoke's swirling patterns. Running Wolf began a low, melodic chant, not in Apache but in a language far older, the words flowing from the elder's staff's knowledge through his lips. As the smoke enveloped Hargrove, his rigid posture gradually softened. His breathing deepened and steadied. The haunted look in his eyes remained, but the frantic edge of his distress began to subside. "My brother," Hargrove said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him. "Thomas, he died in Apache territory 15 years ago. His patrol was ambushed." Running Wolf nodded, continuing the chant between responses. "Many died in those years, on all sides. I blamed all Apache, carried that hatred through every campaign." Hargrove's voice cracked. It became everything. The smoke thickened, forming shapes that only Running Wolf could fully interpret. Ancestral figures, gathering to witness this unexpected healing ceremony between supposed enemies. The herbs were working, opening pathways between conscious thought and deeper understanding. "Your brother," Running Wolf said, guided by intuition and the temple's knowledge. "He was different from you." A ghost of a smile touched Hargrove's lips. "Thomas believed in finding common ground. Thought the army should be building bridges, not waging war. I called him naive. And now," Hargrove's eyes met Running Wolf's across the smoke. "Now I wonder if he was right all along." The mirror's surface rippled again, showing a young officer who resembled Hargrove speaking with Apache leaders, offering tobacco, listening more than talking. Thomas presumably demonstrating the path not taken. As the vision faded, Hargrove straightened slightly, something resolving in his expression. The healing herbs had not erased his pain or guilt, but had created space around them, perspective that allowed him to see beyond the narrow confines of vengeance and duty. "The men at Henderson Settlement," he said. "If your people didn't kill them, who did?" Running Wolf sprinkled another pinch of herbs onto the smoldering mixture. "That is a question that needs answering, but not today. Today is for healing old wounds before creating new ones." The guardian dog made a soft sound of agreement, the smoke swirling around its massive form. In the sacred mirror, reflections shifted and changed, past flowing into present, present opening to possible futures, as two men from opposed worlds breathed the same healing smoke in a temple older than their conflict. Dawn broke over the temple, painting its weathered stones with golden light. Outside, Lieutenant Ellis and the remaining soldiers maintained an uneasy vigil, bewildered by their captain's order to stand down but too disciplined to disobey. Inside, Hargrove had spent the night in the keeper's quarters, sleeping fitfully on one of the ancient pallets, while Running Wolf meditated in the ceremonial chamber. The guardian dog moved between them, watchful and alert, despite the tentative truce. When Hargrove emerged, his face was drawn but his eyes clearer, the healing herb's effects having worked through the night. He found Running Wolf waiting for him in a corridor he hadn't noticed before. "There is something you should see," Running Wolf said, gesturing for Hargrove to follow. They descended a spiraling staircase, the guardian dog padding silently behind them. At the bottom, they entered a large rectangular chamber, whose walls were covered with what appeared at first glance to be elaborate murals. As Hargrove's eyes adjusted to the soft, ambient light, He realized they were looking at maps, hundreds of them, overlapping and interconnecting across every surface. Unlike conventional military maps, with their rigid lines and artificial boundaries, these depicted the land as a living entity. Rivers pulsed with subtle blue luminescence. Mountain ranges rose in textured relief. Forests seemed to whisper with miniature movement. The maps showed seasonal changes, migration routes, water sources, medicinal plant locations, knowledge over centuries of careful observation. Most remarkably, they showed tribal territories not as static domains, but as fluid, shifting patterns that expanded, contracted, and overlapped through seasons and years. The land was depicted not as something to be owned, but as something to be understood, respected, and shared when necessary. The map room, Running Wolf explained, watching Hargrove's reaction carefully. Every keeper has added to it, updated it, preserved its knowledge. Hargrove approached one section that showed familiar territory, the region surrounding Fort Bennington, where his troops were stationed. He could identify landmarks he recognized, but the map revealed aspects of the land he had never noticed, despite years of patrols. "These water sources," he said, pointing to several small blue spirals. "They don't appear on any army maps." Running Wolf nodded. "They are hidden, sacred, known only to those who understand the land's secrets." As they moved deeper into the room, Running Wolf stopped before a particular section of wall. Here the map showed a mountain range Hargrove recognized as the place where Running Wolf's village had been located. Small symbols indicated scattered groups moving through hidden passes and valleys. "My people," Running Wolf said quietly, "those who survived your attack. The temple has shown me where they have gone." Hargrove studied the markings, military training automatically assessing the tactical situation. "They've split into 3 groups, moving toward, what is this place?" He pointed to a secluded valley marked with ancient symbols, Ancestors' Cave, a place of refuge known only to tribal elders. Running Wolf touched the map gently. "My wife and son are with the central group." The revelation hung in the air between them. These weren't anonymous hostiles but families, survivors seeking safety, people with names, relationships, future. Moving to another section, Running Wolf indicated cavalry patrol routes spreading outward from Fort Bennington. "Your soldiers follow predictable paths." "My people know them all." Hargrove frowned. "That information could be used against my men." "Or to avoid them," Running Wolf countered, "to prevent unnecessary conflict." The maps shifted subtly as they spoke, reflecting current conditions across the territories. A drought affecting southern regions, early snow in northern mountains, game migrations adjusting to both. Knowledge that would be invaluable to tribes and settlers alike, if shared rather than hoarded. "The temple doesn't take sides," Running Wolf explained. "It preserves knowledge for all peoples. That was its purpose from the beginning." Hargrove's military mind grasped the strategic implications immediately. This room alone, if the army knew of its existence, they would destroy it. Running Wolf finished, or try to control it. Either way, its purpose would be corrupted. Hargrove couldn't deny the truth of this. He had seen enough of military leadership to know how such knowledge would be weaponized. Running Wolf moved to a central pedestal that Hargrove hadn't noticed before. It held a 3-dimensional representation of the surrounding 50 miles, including Fort Bennington, nearby settlements, tribal grounds, and the temple itself. Small lights pulsed at various locations, indicating movements of people, military patrols, tribal hunters, settler wagons. "Captain Hargrove," Running Wolf said formally, "you came seeking justice for Henderson's settlement. The temple can help us find the truth, but we must agree on what to do with that truth once found." Hargrove studied the map, seeing his own men's position outside the temple, represented by small blue lights. He saw, too, another patrol approaching from the east, reinforcements perhaps, or a search party sent when he failed to return on schedule. A decision point had been reached. The map room had shown Harrove a new perspective, not just of the physical landscape, but of the human situation within it. The simple narrative of hostile Apaches raiding innocent settlers had dissolved, replaced by a complex web of interconnected peoples moving across a shared land, each with their own needs, fears and truths. "What do you propose?" Harrove asked, his voice reflecting the weight of the moment. The guardian dog moved to stand between them, its golden eyes reflecting the map's subtle illumination. Running Wolf prepared to answer. "I propose truth," Running Wolf said, answering Hargrove's question. "The temple can show us who really attacked Henderson's settlement. After that, we both face choices." Harrove considered this, military pragmatism wrestling with newfound doubt. "My orders stand. Regardless of what we discover, I'm expected to return with confirmation that justice was served. Justice requires truth," Running Wolf countered. "The temple values this above all else." Their conversation was interrupted by the guardian dog's sudden alertness. Its ears pricked forward, head turning toward the staircase. Moments later, Lieutenant Ellis appeared at the map-room entrance, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion at finding his captain engaged in apparently peaceful conversation with their quarry. "Sir," Ellis reported, "Sergeant Dawson's patrol has been spotted approaching from the east. They'll arrive by midday." Harrove straightened, unconsciously resuming his military bearing. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Maintain position and await my orders." After Ellis departed, tension returned to the atmosphere. Time was running short. Decisions could no longer be delayed. "If you truly want justice," Running Wolf said, "there is a way to learn the truth, while preserving both your honor and the temple's secrets." He led Harrove from the map room, back through winding corridors to a small chamber they hadn't visited before. Unlike the grand ceremonial spaces or the functionally designed map room, this chamber felt intensely personal. Small niches held items that Running Wolf recognized as keepsakes from previous keepers. Simple objects imbued with meaning beyond their humble appearances. At the chamber's center stood a stone pedestal supporting a small wooden box, intricately carved with the now familiar symbols of tribal unity. The guardian dog positioned itself beside the pedestal, its posture conveying ceremonial significance. Running Wolf opened the box to reveal a silver amulet on a braided leather cord. The amulet's design echoed the medallion he already wore. But where the tribal unity symbol showed all tribes in harmony, this one depicted the guardian dog at the center of the tribal circle. The guardian amulet, Running Wolf explained, worn by each temple keeper when transferring knowledge to a chosen successor. Harrove studied the amulet, recognizing its craftsmanship as beyond anything he had seen before. "Why show me this?" Instead of answering directly, Running Wolf asked, "Do you believe your brother Thomas would have destroyed this temple had he discovered it?" The question caught Harrove off guard. "No," he admitted after a moment. "He would have protected its secrets, tried to learn from them." Running Wolf nodded, lifting the amulet from its box. "The temple has existed for countless generations because each keeper chose wisely when passing its guardianship. Sometimes to family, sometimes to strangers who proved worthy." Understanding dawned in Hargrove's eyes. "You cannot be suggesting—" "Not full guardianship," Running Wolf clarified, "but shared knowledge. A witness from your world who understands what must be protected and why." The guardian Adig made a soft sound that might have been agreement, moving closer to Harrove and looking up with its uncanny golden eyes. "The amulet allows sharing of memories," Running Wolf continued. "Not all the temple's knowledge that comes only with years of study, but enough to understand its importance, enough to make choices, based on truth rather than order." Hargrove's military training urged caution, rejection of anything beyond rational explanation, yet the past day had shown him realities that defied such limitations. "What would this sharing entail?" he asked finally. Running Wolf held out the amulet. "You would see as I have seen the temple's history, its purpose, the truth about Henderson's settlement that the map room revealed to me while you slept." Hargrove's eyebrows rose. "You know who attacked the settlement?" "Yes, but knowledge without understanding is dangerous. The amulet provides both. A tense silence filled the chamber as Harrove weighed his options, his duty as an officer against his awakening conscience, his loyalty to the army against what his brother might have wanted. The simple narrative he had lived by against the complex truth the temple had revealed. "If I refuse?" he asked. Running Wolf's expression remained calm. "Then we return to where we began, enemies, hunter and hunted, and the cycle of bloodshed continues." The guardian dog moved to stand between them, its massive form both barrier and bridge. Its collar jingled softly with the movement, drawing Hargrove's attention to the ancient symbols that matched those on the amulet. "Your brother died seeking understanding," Running Wolf said quietly. "You can honor his memory by finding what he sought." The mention of Thomas struck home. Harrove reached a decision, extending his hand toward the amulet. "What must I do?" Running Wolf placed the guardian amulet in Hargrove's palm, closing the captain's fingers around it. "Open your mind to what it shows you. Do not resist, even if what you see challenges everything you believe." As Harrove gripped the amulet, its silver surface warmed against his skin. The guardian dog placed one massive paw on his boot, completing a connection that suddenly flared with energy that was neither electricity nor fire, but something more primal. Harrove gasped as images flooded his consciousness, not random flashes, but a carefully curated history of the temple and its purpose. He saw its construction by ancient hands, guided by the Sky People, witnessed centuries of keepers maintaining its knowledge through wars, disasters, and changing times. And finally, he saw the truth about Henderson's settlement, a truth that would change everything once it was known. 1 month later, Running Wolf stood at the edge of a hidden valley, the guardian dog at his side. Below, nestled against the protective embrace of towering cliffs, a small encampment had taken shape. Teepees arranged in the traditional circle, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing under the watchful eyes of elders. Survivors from his village, joined by scattered families from other bands who had fled similar attacks. Among them, miraculously, his own family. His wife, Morning Rain, tending a small garden plot. His son, Little Beaver, helping an elder repair a hunting bow. They had found their way here, guided by ancient knowledge passed through generations, knowledge of safe havens that existed beyond military maps and settler trails. Running Wolf touched the medallion at his throat, feeling the temple's distant presence even here. He had returned to his people carrying more than just his own survival. He brought wisdom from the temple archives, preserved in memory and recorded on cured hides. Stories, healing techniques, agricultural methods, long forgotten but now desperately needed. And he carried something else, a small leather bundle nestled carefully in his medicine pouch. The guardian dog nudged his hand, as if reminding him of its importance. Descending into the valley, Running Wolf was greeted with reverence by his people. Word of his encounter at the temple had spread, growing with each telling until it had become legend. Some called him a medicine man now, touched by ancient spirits. Others simply saw their war chief returned when they needed leadership most. Morning Rain's eyes filled with tears as she embraced him. Little Beaver clung to his father's legs, face buried against the buckskin leggings. "You were gone so long," Morning Rain whispered. "We feared the worst." "I found something," Running Wolf replied, his voice carrying new depth and certainty. "Something that will help us survive what is coming." Later, as twilight painted the valley in purple shadows, the tribe gathered around the central fire. Running Wolf opened his medicine pouch and carefully withdrew the leather bundle. Unwrapping it layer by layer, he revealed its contents: seeds. Not ordinary seeds for corn or beans, but varieties unseen for generations from the temple's sacred storage, he explained, handling them with reverence. Plants that grow with little water, resist disease, produce through drought and early frost. The knowledge of their cultivation was nearly lost, preserved only in the temple's memory stone. An elder leaned forward, weathered fingers trembling as he touched one seed, no larger than a grain of sand. My grandfather spoke of these. Planted in the correct pattern, with the correct prayers, they yield enough to feed many families from a small plot. Running Wolf nodded. The temple preserved more than just the seeds. It kept the knowledge of how to grow them, when to harvest, how to save seed for the next planting. As the tribe examined this treasure, Running Wolf shared edited versions of his temple experience. He spoke of ancient wisdom, of healing waters, and guardian spirits. But certain details he kept private: the temple's exact location, the full extent of its powers, and most importantly the arrangement he had reached with Captain Harrove. Miles away, in the office of Fort Bennington's commander, Harrove stood at attention, delivering his report. After extensive pursuit and investigation, sir, I can confirm that the Apache band led by Running Wolf was not responsible for the Henderson Settlement massacre. The commander frowned. Your earlier intelligence suggested otherwise, Captain. Intelligence that proved faulty upon closer examination, Harrove replied steadily. Evidence indicates Henderson himself orchestrated the attack, using Mexican bandits disguised as Apache. His goal was to trigger military action against the tribe, whose land he wished to claim for its water rights. That's a serious accusation against a prominent citizen, Captain. Harrove placed a document on the commander's desk. Henderson's business partner provided sworn testimony after Henderson's convenient disappearance with the settlement's treasury. The U.S. Marshal is already investigating. The commander studied Harrove with narrowed eyes. You've changed, Cap. This request for transfer to the diplomatic corps, it's most unexpected. Harrove touched his chest briefly, where beneath his uniform, the guardian amulet rested against his skin. Though returned to Running Wolf, its imprint remained knowledge, understanding, and purpose that transcended military objectives. Let's just say I've gained perspective, sir. My brother Thomas always believed peaceful coexistence was possible. I'd like to honor his memory by working toward that goal. As the commander reluctantly signed the transfer papers, Harrove felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The temple's truth had set him on a new path, one that might in some small way begin to balance the scales of justice his previous actions had tipped so severely. Back in the hidden valley, Running Wolf knelt at the edge of a prepared plot of earth. With careful movements, he planted the first of the temple's sacred seeds, whispering prayers taught by countless keepers before him. The guardian dog watched attentively, its golden eyes reflecting the day's last light. This planting was more than agriculture. It was hope made tangible. A connection between past wisdom and future possibility. A beginning born from what might have been an ending. As darkness fell, Running Wolf looked toward the distant horizon, where he knew the temple stood, silent and weighty. He had fulfilled his immediate duty as its keeper, by preserving its secrets while sharing its benefits. Someday, perhaps, he would return, or perhaps his son would continue the legacy, guided by the knowledge Running Wolf would carefully impart. Either way, the circle remained unbroken, wisdom preserved, life continuing against all odds. And in a world increasingly defined by boundaries and conflict, one ancient truth endured: that all peoples, like all seeds, required the same elements to thrive: earth, water, air, and the promise of tomorrow's sun.